I'm Lyle. How are you?
Hi, I'm Estela. Nice to meet you.
Oh, Estela. I like
Yes.
that. That is nice. I love those earrings.
Thank you. I find that in this Zoom world, it's always fun to wear fun earrings.
To
Since
have
you
something. Yeah, I love them. Well,
So,
what kind of art do you do?
multidisciplinary theater artists, mask performance,
Ooh,
puppetry, do some film, and I just
awesome.
tinker, I write, I.
I tinker.
What do you do?
I'm a drag performer. I'm a gender illusionist.
Love it. I've never heard it called gender illusionist. I love it.
Yeah, because it's like drag is so many things, but my expertise is fooling the boys that I'm a real woman.
Nice. Nice. Are you- Yeah. So for me, it's a conversation between listening to the self and listening to the outside world. And
Mm,
I wanted to explore that conversation and all of the sounds that already exist and how the city's already talking. And
mhm,
so is it noise or is it music for us?
mm,
Because like we're such a part of a car culture, and often in the city we're on autopilot and going and going and going, and we tend to just kind of go in here. And so I kind of
mm.
wanted to explore that and have this conversation with listening, internal and external.
I felt like I was watching my brain during this last year. Dang. And it was funny, like halfway through it, I was like, yeah, this is exactly my life in my brain right now, except there's way more dogs barking. And then there were dogs barking in the end. I was like, great. I love that. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Oftentimes, when we're asked to listen, the way we receive it is based on our experience,
Mm,
and sometimes we listen with especially in this times with so much trauma,
mhm.
and that stuff starts to resurface, and
Or the realization of trauma, like
yeah.
deep rooted trauma. And people basically I translated this as being a drag queen. Like I'm often on microphones, and it often you do have to stand up for what you believe is right and what the like general consensus of right is. So it does often get political. So that being said, my social media platforms, I attract and engage in all types of conversations. And the beautiful thing about having a conversation instead of a confrontation is that drag has taught me to remove ego from something. So when I'm listening to the opposite side or the end of the spectrum, I'm removing my own ego because I genuinely have an interest in settling what we're arguing about. I'm not interested in just going in circles and perpetuating the whatever we hear in our own echo chambers. So that all being said, I thought about spectrums and opposites, and I thought of fire and ice and how they're two different things, but if they're brought together, like in this makeup plot, it could be something really beautiful and weird and cool. And that's what we should focus on in the world, is finding that like that beauty.
Nice.
Thank you, thank you. Drag is fun, isn't it?
Yes. What's your name? What's your drag name?
Just Lyle, that's me. I just shed the whole like alter ego name because it wasn't an alter ego for me. It was just an extension of myself. And Lyle is already a gender non-binary type of name. So I just went with that, and it's easier to remember. Don't get
Beautiful
confused.
and fascinating. I didn't I've never heard of that, and then
Yeah,
it makes a lot of sense. I loved it, and
thank you.
I love this idea of fire and ice, and how that exists also within all of us, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's just really interesting having them converge.
Yeah.
And you look beautiful.
And that's the beauty of it, you know? So just find the beauty in these, you know, opposite sides, and focus on that. Throw some glitter on it. Life's too short. None of us are getting out alive.
Wow.
That would be the gay scene, the gay culture. All those homosexuals, I connect with them. No, it would be the LGBTQIA plus community, obvi, for me. How about you?
For me, I'd say Latinos I really relate to the underdog and relate to working immigrant Latinos, just because feel like my identity is very I always think about this idea of unincorporated LA. I'm very much of a city girl, but I grew up in like the southern part of LA, where like 5 minutes one way it's in Gardena, 5 minutes the other you're in Inglewood, 5 minutes another way you're in Watts, and so it's like kind of like a no man's land. And over here in Pasadena, I'm at the very edge as well, so it's kind of like and really this is home base, but I spend so much time driving back and forth to all of the different gigs, so I really feel but I really do feel pulled to, you know, South LA, but also the community. I work a lot in Boyle Heights and in East LA. And you know,
I vibe with East LA.
Yeah, for a long time I was like, I wish I was born and raised here, just because of the vibrancy of like the artist in the area. There's a lot of artists and resistance there, and so I'm just really jealous because there wasn't much where I grew up.
Yeah. I know what you mean. I feel that's how I feel about like LA. I was like, if I just like was a kid.
I was like, I don't know. And then when we found the apartment where we're at, I was like, okay, there's a Food for Less, there's a Roscoe's. Okay. I'll trust this place.
Set up.
I spent the first year looking for the elotero.
What is that?
The guy that sells the corn and the cob. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I spent like a year, like I would it's pretty bad, but I would go near like schools. I was like, they have to go like after school, and like that's where they sell them. And
you were creeping outside the schoolyard.
I know, but looking for the elotes. And finally, I don't know where I was driving, and I saw it, and I pulled over. I'm like, oh my god, I've been looking for you. And he's like, take my number. I'm like, what? Yes.
Again, that my first like introduction to Los Angeles was that, and like the fruit as well, all of that, because I lived downtown for a little bit, and it was all over there. That was what I ran on.
Yes.
Again, I engaged in conversation with a Trump supporter, and I was just like, and this was after he like lost. And I just said, like, we no longer have to entertain this buffoonery anymore. And you can be a Republican, you can be a conservative, you cannot be a Trump supporter anymore. He is equivalent to Hitler in my book. And their only thing that they had to combat that with was, oh, how can you say he doesn't have the death count? Yet, if he was reelected, he sure could get real close to the death count that Hitler had.
The fact that they came back at you with that?
Exactly. Oh, it's not the same death count.
Is that the best argument
you're gonna give that a chance? It's crazy, and that's what I'm saying is like, I do always want to like come to an understanding with people, but like if this past presidency has taught me anything, it's that there's a reason that the word moot exists. Like, it is pointless. Of like, there's just no seeing eye to eye with some people.
Maybe a thing that I do is being apologetic, or finding like, well, what's wrong with them, or what happened? Because I've always, you know, thought like it has to be something deep. And I don't think, you know, just the way we saw the insurrection, there is folks that are CEOs that are doing well in life. So it's not an intellectual, it's not a, oh, they're not smart. It's definitely a choice.
Yeah.
And it's definitely something rooted in, you know, and I go back to this trauma. Like, what is it that, you know, like when I hear people like talking shit about immigrants, a lot of times it's people are unable to see that immigrants aren't a threat to them.
Mm.
And yet there's like this invisible competition of like they're taking away our jobs or they're taking away
What
our
is that?
services.
I feel like that was like planted somewhere and it just like took off, like, because it wasn't here one day and it was all anyone was saying the next.
And it's this thing of like, I'm gonna suffer if you get more.
Pretense. Right. It's like, stop trying to validate your racism and homophobia and hate and ignorance to understand someone else. It's like, that's what it is. Just say that you're an ignorant, racist, homophobe, and we can move on. Like, just don't try and tell me that it's this. No, like, that's what you are, and we're gonna move on.
Yeah.
And I feel like we don't have to have those conversations anymore now that he's out. I'm just like, you know.
It's difficult. Yeah.
Life's too short.
I've blocked so many people on social media because of it. And mostly it's an act of self-preservation.
Yeah, you're protecting yourself. It's defense.
It's like there was a time where I'm like, well, I want to see what they're thinking, because I felt like 2016 was like a wide awakening of like, oh, there's so many people that think this way. And so I had a curiosity to keep listening to people that thought, so that I could have a perspective. But I feel like at a certain point, especially like this summer, I was like, you know what? No, I don't owe them my energy, and I don't want to give, because right now I'm bleeding out and I'm in pain.
There's not a leg in sight to stand on. There's not a leg in sight. Okay, I actually have an interesting answer for that first question, because Los Angeles as a New Yorker is all about like coming in. I noticed that it's all about like who you hang out with and who you know and yada yada yada, that whole gist. But what's interesting now is it's like cool to be on the right side of history.
So interesting. You know, I'm just gonna push back a little bit on that first part. As a LA born and raised, I would say
no.
I think the first part where you said that LA is so much of like who you know and all that other stuff.
I will say the industry, the world that I jumped into.
Yes. And so I just wanted to push back because I feel like in LA there's two different like
absolutely
cultures, and there's a lot of folks that come in from other places because they would come for like, oh, the Hollywood
the glitz and the glam,
make it, and so that is in its culture, a whole other culture. And then sometimes I find when folks that come in, they become so jaded and they're like, fuck LA, like LA is this, LA is so pretentious, LA is so, and there's like a dogging of LA, but all they know is that bubble of LA, of the making it in Hollywood. That's a bunch of folks that came from all over the United States.
Yeah,
there are deep communities here of people living regular, beautiful, complex lives, and that oftentimes the voices that are louder are the ones that have the higher platform. And these are our essential workers right now that are out there working and making the city run. And so I just want to kind of highlight them, because I feel like for me that's something that's important as I toe these two worlds of like the community of artists, you know, trying to make it in Hollywood, which is also a hard thing, and just for me in general, also just as an artist, you know, straddling that is just a whole other, you know, it's a whole other thing. And that's something that for me, it's still something I'm very curious about, because even the part of LA that I find myself not listening to as much um is the West Side, which is funny that you're like, I'm in Venice.
Pack my shit up. Pack it up.
And I know it's bad, and I know it's because of my bias. But it's like the freeways affect so much of how divided we are, or how we get by, or where we go. And I feel like trying to get to the West Side in itself, like, is it worth that drive because of the traffic?
Oh no, it's a day affair. It's a whole day affair. You plan, your flight gets in, then you got to no.
Yeah.
No, but I get you. I recently just gave up my car lease was up, and I was like, I don't know that I want to like contractually obligate myself to another like long-term financial situation. So I'm gonna go at LA sans vehicle, and I sure chose the wrong part of LA to do that in. This was lovely. What do you mean? This was the highlight of my day.
Yes, I really enjoyed meeting you, someone that I don't know you, and I think, you know, you when I was told that I was going to meet the artist, I'm like, what if it's someone I do know? And so it's just such a treat to see and speak to someone that I normally wouldn't, because you're just not on. I just
because I live in Venice and you live in Pasadena.
And that's just temporary.
Exactly.
But it's just beautiful to know you, to know your artistry, to know where your passions lie, and to see your work. Coming back to this last question of how can we use art to change, and this representation, I feel like that's what your video also was about. Is coming in your full self.
Well, when you really dissect drag, like everything is drag. Your decision to wear those earrings on this Zoom tonight is your drag. Like that's what you're choosing to put out into the world. So I challenge everyone to do drag.